Office for Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs, OCHA, an agency of the United Nations, UN, says over 241,000 people in South Sudan have been displaced as a result of yearly flood disaster in the country that have affected millions of the African residents for more than a decade. OCHA in a report on Thursday said this year flooding disaster took over homes, markets and cut off roads, making it impossible to transport aid to the affected victims. Homes and markets are in floodwaters, forcing people to seek shelter on higher ground. Community members in flood-hit areas are coming together to scoop out water and construct dikes in response to rising water levels, OCHA stated in a tweet. AFP had on March 2023 reported that for the last 4 years, unprecedented flooding linked to climate change has turned almost two-thirds of South Sudan into swampland. The environmental catastrophe is most apparent in the city of Bentiu, in the northern part of the country. Local media stated, the persistent flooding in Unity State, South Sudan, has led to severe deforestation, with trees wilting after prolonged exposure to water, becoming firewood rather than thriving ecosystems. Reuters in August 28, 2024 published a photograph of a survivor who climbed a wall with assistance following devastating floods in South Toka, Red Sea State, Sudan. Close watchers have said, floods and highway attacks across South Sudan in September 2024 worsened humanitarian access as 15 major supply routes were rendered impassable, impacting the delivery of essential humanitarian supplies to some 500,000 people. There are concerns that there may be looming health crisis in the Unity State, South Sudan, as flood victims remain trapped after 2 weeks of heavy flooding and with rising water levels. There may be an increased risk of waterborne diseases, exacerbating the plight of affected communities who struggle for access to clean water and medical care. AFP reporting the recent observations from OCHA, stated that some 893,000 people have been affected by flooding in South Sudan and more than 241,000 displaced, the UN's humanitarian agency OCHA said Thursday in a grim update on the disaster. Aid agencies have warned that the world's youngest country, highly vulnerable to climate change, is facing its worst flooding in decades. Flooding continues to affect and displace people across the country, the United Nations Office for the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs said in a statement. Heavy rainfall and floods have rendered 15 main supply routes impassable, restricting physical access. OCHA said about 893,000 people were flood affected in 42 of South Sudan's 78 counties as well as the Abai administrative area, a disputed zone claimed by both Juba and Khartoum. It said Unity and Warrap states in the north of the country accounted for more than 40% of the affected population. More than 241,000 people were displaced in 16 counties and the Abai area, seeking shelter on higher ground, OCHA added. Since gaining independence from Sudan in 2011, the world's youngest nation has remained plagued by chronic instability, violence and economic stagnation as well as climate disasters such as drought and floods. The World Bank said in an October 1st update that the latest floods were worsening an already critical humanitarian situation marked by severe food insecurity, economic decline, continued conflict, disease outbreaks, and the repercussions of the Sudan conflict. The conflict in Sudan has seen more than 797,000 refugees pour into South Sudan as of September, the World Bank said, almost 80% of them South Sudanese returnees. The country also faces another period of political paralysis after the presidency announced yet another extension to a transitional period agreed in a 2018 peace deal, delaying elections due to take place in December by another 2 years. Key provisions of the transitional agreement remain unfulfilled, including the creation of a constitution and the unification of the rival forces of President Salva Kiir and his four-Riek Machar. The delays have exasperated South Sudan's partners and the United Nations. UN Mission Chief Nicholas Haysom said on Wednesday there was deep frustration and fatigue among the South Sudanese people. The international community needed tangible evidence that this country's leaders are committed to a democratic future. South Sudan boasts plentiful oil resources, but the vital source of revenue was decimated in February when an export pipeline was damaged in war-torn Sudan. Meanwhile, National Catholic reporters said Inyawal is among 750,000 South Sudanese threatened by the floods and at risk of starvation among a population of more than 12.7 million people, of whom about 61% identify as Christian. It would be recalled that in 2020, South Sudan declared a 3-month state of emergency as the country was declared a disaster zone due to floods that have affected over 500,000 people, killed many, and destroyed 100,000 homes. Also, in 2021, large parts of South Sudan were flooded over a year and a half. Nigeria Customs Service, NCS, has seized 2 lorries and 1,046 kegs of smuggled premium motor spirit known as Petrol and deposited the smuggled petroleum goods at 2 fuel stations for onward sales of the products to members of the public for 630 naira per litre. Nigeria Customs Service, in a news release on Wednesday, said one of the suspected smugglers was arrested during the operations. The statement reads thus: the Nigeria Customs Service (NCS) Operation Whirlwind has recorded significant success in its fight against fuel smuggling, seizing 2 lorries, 1,046 kegs filled with premium motor spirit (PMS), and 12 drums of petroleum products. In a press conference held on Wednesday, the 9th of October 2024, in Yola, the Adamawa state capital, the Comptroller General of Customs, CGC, Adewale Adeniyi, represented by the Deputy Comptroller General of Customs, DCG, Aliyu Alajogun, in charge of enforcement, investigation, and inspection, announced that since the operations launched on the 10th of June 2024, efforts have intensified, yielding further results across multiple border regions. He said, our ongoing operations have recorded substantial seizures in various locations, including the northwest borders in the Sokoto-Kebbi axis, the southwest borders around the Seme-Badagry and Idiroko axis, and the southern borders in Cross River and Akwa Ibom states. I am pleased to announce that in this latest phase of Operation Whirlwind, we have seized 2 lorries carrying smuggled petroleum products, 1,046 kegs filled with PMS, and 12 drums of petroleum products. Additionally, 1 suspect has been apprehended in connection with these smuggling activities, he noted. According to him, the seizures underscore the persistent nature of the challenge and the necessity of continued vigilance and action. The customs chief warned those engaged in illicit activities, stating that the full force of the law will be brought to bear on anyone caught smuggling our nation's resources. He called on all Nigerians, particularly residents of Adamawa and other border states, to support the operation. Your vigilance and cooperation are crucial in our collective efforts to safeguard our nation's resources and ensure that the benefits of fuel price deregulation are fully realized by all Nigerians. He also announced the immediate auction of the seized products at 2 petrol stations in Yola, at the rate of 630 naira per litre. In the same vein, the national coordinator in charge of the operations, Comptroller Hussein Ejibilu, also emphasized the negative consequences of aiding smugglers to execute their illegal activities. Comptroller Idris seeks enhanced collaboration with security agencies in Katsina. The Nigeria Customs Service (NCS) has called for stronger cooperation among security agencies in Katsina State to tackle cross-border crimes and internal security threats. This appeal was made by Comptroller Abba Aji Idris, the Customs Area Controller of the Katsina Command, during courtesy visits to various security agencies in the state on Thursday, October 10, 2024. While visiting the Air Force Base, Comptroller Idris stressed the importance of intelligence sharing and joint operations among all security agencies to combat trans-border crimes. He noted that such collaboration would enhance national security, promote unity, and eliminate rivalry among security outfits in the state. He also acknowledged the long-standing partnership between the NCS and the Nigerian Air Force in areas such as border management and capacity building. In response, Air Commander Garba Ibrahim Jibiya reaffirmed the Nigerian Air Force's commitment to working closely with the NCS to address security challenges in the state. He attributed the noticeable reduction in crime rates, particularly in frontline local government areas, to the improved synergy among security agencies. Comptroller Idris also visited the Katsina State Police Command, where he called for joint efforts to combat economic sabotage. He assured the police of the NCC's readiness to collaborate in intelligence sharing and ensuring a peaceful environment for Nigerians. Commissioner of Police Aliyu Musa welcomed the visit, describing it as a positive step towards strengthening the existing relationship among security agencies in the state. Other security agencies visited by Comptroller Idris included the Nigeria Security and Civil Defense Corps, the National Drug Law Enforcement Agency, the Federal Fire Service, and the Federal Road Safety Corps in Katsina. All the agencies pledged their support for enhanced collaboration and partnership to ensure effective. Federal High Court sitting in Lagos State has fixed November 1, 2024 to rule on the application brought before it by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, for the final forfeiture of the properties and monies linked to the former Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN Governor Godwin Emefiele, who is currently facing series of lawsuits at different courts across the country over his administrative behaviors and operational decisions while he was the Apex Bank governor in the West Africa country. Justice Dende Depeolu of the Federal High Court in Lagos on Friday refused to stay further proceedings in the suit filed by the Economic and Financial Crimes Commission, EFCC, seeking the forfeiture of properties and monies linked to a former governor of the Central Bank, CBN, Godwin Emefiele. Emefiele had, through his lawyer, Olalekan Ojo, SAN, urged the judge to stay proceedings pending the hearing of an appeal he filed before the Court of Appeal seeking to nullify the temporary forfeiture order earlier granted by the court. Rejecting the plea, Justice Dende Depeolu held that interested parties had the right to approach the Court of Appeal, which must be contingent on the trial court's decision. The court also held that an appeal flows from the decision of a trial court, but in the instant case, the court had not made any decision as to any application filed or as to the substantive issues in the suit. During the court sitting on September 12th, Ojo had urged the court to stay further proceedings in the case pending the determination of the banker's appeal. Emefiele's lawyer, Ojo, had said, "We're urging your lordship to stay proceedings pending the hearing and determination of the appeal court to avoid judicial rascality." EFCC lawyer, Rotimi Oyedepo, SAN, objected, insisting that no application from Emefiele was taken and ruling on that crystallized to an appeal. Justice Depeolu on Friday therefore fixed November 1, 2024 to rule on the application by the Anti-Graft Agency for final forfeiture of the $2.045 million, 7 choice landed properties and shares linked to Emefiele. Meanwhile, in another court entertaining a case of alleged fraud against the former CBN governor, Godwin Emefiele, a former deputy governor of the Apex Bank, testified before the Federal High Court in Abuja on Wednesday that Emefiele didn't have the Nigeria President, Muhammadu Buhari, and CBN board's approval for Naira redesign that led to scarcity of the Naira notes in the country prior to the February 2023 general elections in the country. EFCC, in a news release, reported that Edward Adamu, fourth prosecution witness, PW4, in the trial of the former governor of the Central Bank of Nigeria, CBN, Godwin Emefiele, on Wednesday, October 9, 2024, told Justice Marian Aneni of the Federal Capital Territory, FCT, High Court, Maitama, Abuja, that Emefiele did not have the approval of either former President Muhammadu Buhari or that of the CBN board for the 2023 redesign of Naira notes as required by the rules. Led in evidence by Prosecution Counsel Rotimi Oyedepo, SAN, Adamu disclosed that the usual process for currency redesign begins with the Director of Currency Operations submitting a proposal to the Committee of Governors, COG. The COG then transmits the proposal to CBN Board for approval, with the final stage being the seeking of presidential endorsement. Emefiele, he said, bypassed these procedures by simply calling for a COG meeting and presented what he claimed was a presidential approval and proceeded with the redesign straight away. I became aware of it in October 2022 when the governor informed us, the deputy governors, that he had gotten an express approval to redesign the currency. Then on the 26th of October 2022, we were formally informed of the presidential approval of the redesign. So that is what happened in October. Then there was a formal announcement of the currency redesign. At the meeting, the governor showed us the approval of the president by showing us the page where the approval of the president is. Subsequently, there was a board meeting of the board of directors, where we were also informed of the presidential approval of the currency redesign, he said. He further disclosed that the current designs of the notes fundamentally differ from what was originally approved, stating that Emefiele unilaterally made the changes. The redesign affected 200 Nairas, 500 Nairas, and 1,000 Nairas notes. When the Defense Counsel, Olalekan Ojo-san, sought to know if there had been instances where a presidential approval was gotten for an action before the CBN board was informed, the witness stated that such was not the practice during his time at the Apex Bank. Justice Aneni discharged the witness from the dock at the end of the cross-examination and adjourned the matter till October 17, 2020.
Bringing you the news in a more digital way.